Welcome to Bible Stories. Today I want to tell you a story of Elijah in the Bible. Who was Elijah in the Bible? At Elijah's word, kings trembled, the rain stopped, a jug of oil never ran dry, a boy was raised from the dead, fire fell from the sky, revival broke out, and hundreds of idolatrous prophets of Baal were executed. Claims to fame. Elijah is one of the greatest prophets and miracle workers in the Hebrew Scriptures. He is also one of two prophets who appear with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Worst failures. Fearing Jezebel, Elijah flees into the desert and asks the Lord to take his life. He wrongly assumes that he is the Lord's only prophet within the kingdom of Israel. Meaning of the name Elijah in the Bible. The name Elijah comes from the Old Testament of the Bible and stems from a Hebrew expression signifying, Jehovah is my God. The biblical Elijah was a prophet known for upholding the worship of God and doing miracles in God's name. The prophet Elijah is venerated by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. According to Very Well Family, the name Elijah has the following origin, gender use, and pronunciations. The name Elijah comes from the Hebrew words El, God, and Yah, Jehovah. It is found in the Old Testament, specifically in the first and second books of Kings. Elijah is historically the masculine form of the name. Eliah and Eliana are sometimes used as feminine variations. Who is the prophet Elijah in the Bible? Prophet Elijah, Greek name Elias, the God-seer, miracle worker, and zealot for faith in God, was born of the tribe of Aaron in the town of Tishba, for which he was called the Tishbite. When Elias was born, his father Sabas saw angels of God hovering around the child, wrapping the child in fire and feeding him flames. That was a foreshadowing of Elias's fiery character and his God-given fiery power. He spent his entire youth in divine contemplation and prayer, frequently withdrawing into the wilderness to contemplate and pray in tranquility. At that time, the Jewish kingdom was divided into two unequal parts. The kingdom of Judah, consisting of only two tribes, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, with their capital in Jerusalem, and the kingdom of Israel, consisting of the remaining 10 tribes, with their capital in Samaria. The descendants of Solomon governed the former, and the descendants of Jeroboam, a servant of Solomon, governed the latter. The greatest confrontation that the prophet Elias had was with the Israelite king Ahab and his evil wife Jezebel, for they worshipped idols and were turning the people away from serving the one living God. In addition, Jezebel, a Syrian, persuaded her husband to erect a temple for the Syrian god Baal and appointed many priests to the service of this false god. Through great miracles, Elijah displayed the power and authority of God. He closed up the heavens so that there was no rain for 3 years and 6 months. He called fire down from heaven to consume the sacrifice to God, which the pagan priests were unable to do for the false god, Baal. He brought rain by his prayer. He miraculously multiplied flour and oil in the home of the widow in Zarephath and resurrected her son. He prophesied to Ahab that the dogs would lick up his blood, and to Jezebel that the dogs would consume her flesh, all of which came to pass. And he performed many other miracles and prophesied other events as well. He spoke with God and heard the voice of God in the calm, after the wind, earthquake, and fire on Mount Horeb. Before his death, he designated Elisha as his successor in the prophetic calling. With his mantle, he divided the waters of the Jordan. Finally, he was taken up into the heavens in a fiery chariot drawn by fiery horses. On Mount Tabor, He appeared together with Moses beside our Lord Jesus Christ at the Transfiguration. At the end of the world, Elijah will appear again to put an end to the power of the Antichrist. Revelation 11. Sourced from the prologue of Ochrid, July 20th. Bible verses about Elijah. If you're going to read only 3 Bible chapters about Elijah, take 11 minutes and read 1 Kings 17 to 19, or take 4 minutes and read the main part of the story in 1 Kings 18. Most of Elijah's story is told in 1 Kings 17 to 19 and 2 Kings 1-2. Quick references to Elijah appear in 2 Kings 3:11, 2 Kings 9:36, 2 Kings 10:10, and 2 Kings 10:17. In addition, Elijah shows up near the end of the Hebrew Scriptures in 2 Chronicles 21:12-15, letter telling Judah's king Jehoram about his forthcoming and rather gruesome death. And he shows up at the end of the Old Testament in Malachi 4:5-6, prophecy about John the Baptist as the forerunner of the Messiah. In the New Testament, quick references to Elijah appear in Matthew 11:14, Matthew 16:14, Matthew 27:47-49, Mark 6:15, and Mark 8:28, Luke 1:17, Luke 4:25-26, Luke 9:8, and Luke 9:19, John 1:21 and John 1:25, Romans 11:2, and James 5:17-18. Last but not least, Elijah appears with Moses and Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew 17:3-13, Mark 9:4-13, and Luke 9:30-33. Elijah's missing years from the Bible.
We're introduced to Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, in 1 Kings 17:1.
We're told nothing more, not even who his parents were. For that reason, Elijah's life story doesn't start until he's probably 30, 40, or 50 years old. Yes, we typically think of Elijah as an old man, but that may or may not have been the case. Elijah's ministry years in the Bible. Elijah never has anything good to say about wicked tyrants. Near the end of his ministry, Elijah writes a letter informing the southern kingdom of Judah's wicked king Jehoram that he will die in a most excruciating manner. Otherwise, Elijah focuses his ministry on the northern kingdom, condemning Israel's wicked king Ahab, Queen Jezebel, and their sons. Then again, Elijah isn't just doom and gloom. During 3.5 years without rain, the Lord instructs Elijah to hide. First, the Lord tells him to hide by a stream called Cherith, east of the Jordan River, where ravens will feed him. Second, the Lord tells Elijah to hide in a town called Zarephath, on the Mediterranean coast, between Tyre and Sidon. There a poor widow will feed him from a miraculous supply of grain and oil. In this season of hiding, the Lord graciously cares for Elijah at every turn. At the end of these years without rain, Elijah calls a national contest on Mount Carmel between the Lord God, creator of heaven and earth, and the wicked pagan gods of Baal and Asherah. It's quite a dramatic story, well worth reading, or reading again. After his great triumph atop Mount Carmel, however, Elijah fears Queen Jezebel's vow to take his life by about this time tomorrow. 1 Kings 19:2. Actually, fears is an understatement. Elijah flees into southern Judah's wilderness, collapses under a tree, and begs the Lord to take him before Jezebel's men find and slaughter him. In other words, Elijah is depressed out of his mind. In this season of hiding, the Lord sends an angel to revive him and give him his final instructions, including appointing his successor, Elisha. Elijah's miracles in the Bible. Causing rain to cease in Israel for 3.5 years, 1 Kings 17:1. Being fed by ravens sent by the Lord, 1 Kings 17:7. Multiplying a widow's grain and oil, 1 Kings 17:18-16. raising that widow's son from the dead. 1 Kings 17:17-24. Calling fire from heaven atop Mount Carmel. Kings 18:36-38. Causing it to rain again after 3.5 years of drought. 1 Kings 18:46. Fasting from food for 40 days while trekking to Mount Horeb. 1 Kings 19:8. Prophesies that Ahab's sons would all be destroyed. 1 Kings 21:22. Prophesying that Jezebel would be eaten by dogs. Kings 21:23. Prophesying that Ahaziah would die of his illness. 2 Kings 1:4-17. Calling fire from heaven to destroy 51 soldiers. Kings 1:10. Calling fire from heaven on another 51 soldiers. 2 Kings 1:12. Parting of the Jordan River while accompanied by Elisha. 2 Kings 2:8. Promising that Elisha would receive a double portion of his spirit. 2 Kings 2:10. Being caught up to heaven with a chariot of fire. 2 Kings 2:11. Prophesying that Jehoram would die a horrible death. 2 Chronicles 21:12-15. Appearing with Moses and Jesus. Matthew 17:3-13, Mark 9:4-30, Luke 9:30-33. Lessons from Elijah's Bible story. Moses has his place in American cinema with the 10 Commandments and the Prince of Egypt. It's about time someone commissioned a new epic about one of the Old Testament's other truly great heroes. The prophet Elijah ranks right up there with Moses as one of the most dramatic prophets of the Lord. At Elijah's word, kings trembled, the rains stopped, a jug of oil never ran dry, a boy was raised from the dead, fire fell from the sky, revival broke out, and hundreds of idolatrous prophets of Baal were executed. Yet James 5:17 says that Elijah was as human as we are. After running almost the length of a marathon, this great prophet entered the city of Jezreel just in time to hear wicked Queen Jezebel's murderous threats. How does Elijah respond? True to life, Scripture says he panicked. After several days on the run, Elijah collapses, exhausted, lonely, frightened, and feeling utterly defeated. In his desperation, he foolishly begs the Lord to take his life. Instead, the Lord renews Elijah with a double portion of food, drink, rest. And then he sends him out again with a powerful demonstration of his power, with a quiet word to his heart, with a new commission, and with the assurance that many others also were on his side. Whether in victory or despair, we can trust the Lord to know exactly what we need, and to meet our every need in his, sometimes, miraculous ways. 1 Kings 17-19. Elijah announces a great drought. Now Elijah the Tishbite, from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." Elijah fed by ravens. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, "Leave here, turn eastward and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there." So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan, and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Elijah and the widow at Zarephath. Sometime later the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon, and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread." "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have, and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family, for the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse, and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" "Give me your son," Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with, by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." If you'd like me to continue with the remaining text, let me know. Elijah and Obadiah. After a long time, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we will not have to kill any of our animals." So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" "Yes," he replied. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." "What have I done wrong?" asked Obadiah, "that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, 'Elijah is here.' I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab, and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, "Elijah is here. He will kill me." Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." Elijah on Mount Carmel. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has many prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink. But Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. "Go and look toward the sea," he told his servant, and he went up and looked. "There is nothing there," he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and a heavy rain started falling. Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. Kings 1.